Hello, this is Storm Warden coming back at you today with another video update. And today we're going to talk about Tropical Storm Milton, and we're going to talk about the potential for a major hurricane to make approach to Florida, particularly anywhere as far north as Cedar Key, all the way as far south as maybe Miami. So still some spread, but generally speaking, guys, it's not looking good for you guys in Florida. Model consensus has definitely came in a lot stronger ever since we last talked about this. You have some models getting this as high as a Cat 4, Cat 5. So we're gonna talk all about that. We're gonna talk about some limiting factors as well that could maybe be the best case scenario. But overall, guys, I want to keep the same messaging through the video that if you're in Florida, this will be an impactful event. But there are some things that could make this a better case scenario. So we're going to talk all about that today. If you've been liking my weather content, please subscribe. But without further ado, we're going to get right into it. So we're going to first start with a look at Tropical Storm Milton. And here we are. We're looking at it. And generally speaking, it's pretty much maintained convection. It's actually blown up a new area of convection. It looks like it's pretty close to that low level center. So again, we got Tropical Storm Milton, pretty small storm in size, not very large, which is why we're seeing such strong intensity on the hurricane models and global models. But generally speaking, this is a pretty small system, which is also going to help it maintain its intensity or even intensify rapidly before it gets close to landfall. So that's Tropical Storm Milton right now over here in the far western Gulf. So now we're going to go over to the hurricane models. Now we're going to start off with the HWRF model. We're going to go to the HMO model. I think that's how you call it. And then we go to the HAFS-A model and then the HAFS-B model. And we're going to look at all these models. We're going to break them down. We're gonna really get deep into this. So stick around if you want to hear all the meteorology behind this. Now, looking at HWRF model, this is for Milton. So we're looking at 060. This came out a few hours ago, earlier this morning, like around 6, 7 a.m. So we're going through time, and look at how rapidly the HWRF model strengthens the system. But I want you to take note of something. Notice how small this system is. Like, you look at this, and this is a fairly small system. Well, one thing about these small systems, and we talked, and if you go back in time, we talked a little bit about this with Francine. When you have these smaller compact cores, these smaller storms in general, they're able to hold their weight against dry air and wind shear a lot more compared to these bigger storms are much more susceptible to dry air intrusions and even the lightest wind shear. Those bigger storms are much more susceptible to that than these smaller tight compact cores that have pretty much built their own and are able to also hold their own weight. So because the system is so small in size, this is why intensity guidance is so strong, and this is kind of similar to Francine. We had a now, granted, I think the overall environment is more favorable with Milton, but I think the overall theme is kind of the same. Probably a rapidly strengthening system right up to landfall that probably weakens or even rapidly decays on approach to landfall from shear and dry air. But before then, I really don't see what's going to be stopping this system from rapidly intensifying. The fact that, and I think this, because entertain the idea that this could easily approach Cat 4 hurricane, possibly low end Cat 5. I'm telling you guys right now, these small systems like these, they're notorious for just really rapidly intensifying with no breaks until it gets right up to landfall where it rapidly decays from shear and dry air. Because one thing that I think is well forecasted by some of these models is that rapidly decaying of the system from shear. That trough to the north, and we'll get a little bit into this later in the video, but there's going to be a trough to the north. Well, that trough is going to have to do two things. One, still have a favorable trough interaction, which should allow rapidly intensifying system right up to landfall. But another thing that's going to do is it's going to part a pretty big area of shear just to the north. So probably what you're going to have happen is you're going to probably have a more lopsided, maybe more of an asymmetric looking system once it makes landfall. So that is certainly a possibility because though these small systems are able to hold their weight more, once you get under that stronger shear, that should help to tear that core apart a little bit. And once you do that and it opens up a little bit, you're definitely susceptible to gyre intrusions, which should also help to decay the system right up to landfall. So, we could be looking at a Cat 4 on approach, and it may make landfall as a low end Cat 3 or Cat 2 hurricane. But generally speaking, guys, that's still a big deal. That doesn't change the fact that this is going to be a high impact event for Florida. But it does highlight the opportunity that the guidance that shows these Cat 4s, these Cat 5 hurricanes, and may not make landfall that strong. But that is certainly a possibility. Now we're going to look at the HMO model, which I haven't looked at yet this morning. But you see it's rapidly strengthening the system. And I mean, look at that. That is a fairly strong system, but you see what I'm saying though? Look how it rapidly decays the system on approaching landfall. We're at probably a strong low end Cat 4 hurricane. And look how that just rapidly decays as it approaches landfall. So this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here, where you have a very strong hurricane that probably rapidly decays from shear and dry air. So that's certainly a possibility, and it could help matters. But I still think that regardless, this will be an impactful system for Florida. But I do think that the upper end scenarios where we have Cat 5 or 4 making landfall, those are definitely questionable because one thing that we know for sure that we're going to have a trough to the north, which should impart shear to the north of this system. And once that shear hits that core, you're going to be more susceptible to these drier intrusions. And the fact this is already a smaller system means that when it starts to decay, it won't take much to really decay this system. So again, definitely something that's interesting. But HMO shows my thoughts very well. A strong hurricane that rapidly decays on approach to landfall. Now we're gonna stop and look at the HAFSA model, and we're going through. And again, small system, very very small system. It gets all the way down to almost a Cat 5 hurricane off the HAFSA model, and then it rapidly decays it. I mean, it gets all the way down to a Cat 5, and then weakens it to like a Cat 2 hurricane. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure this model is overdoing the weakening process, but again, it shows my thoughts very well. A strong hurricane on approach to Florida that probably rapidly decays from wind shear and dry air, but still is an impactful event for Florida. But you can notice how it looks very lopsided. Pretty much the bottom half of this system is clear of any significant precipitation, and then part of that's because of dry air and wind shear that is sneaking in around the system. So again, you could have an approaching Cat 5 that weakens considerably before landfall. Granted, this model is probably overdoing that. I don't really see how you would have a strong Cat 5 hurricane weaken to a Cat 2 like that. But crazier things are happening. And when it comes to wind shear gyre, we know what happens. We know how they interact with hurricanes. But generally speaking, guys, that is certainly a threat. I kind of like how models are kind of showing my thoughts very well. I think they're doing a really good job highlighting it. I just don't think they have a right grasp. I think some of them are overdoing the weakening process, but I think they have an overall right idea. And again, here's the HAFSB model, and it gets it down to a Cat 5. It gets it below. It gets it in the 830 millibars. Please ignore that. That's not going to happen. But it just goes to show you that this system could be a banker. I mean, it just look how small. I mean, when you have such a small system like this, guy, I'm telling you, you can get some crazy rapid intensification. But I'm telling you right now, though, once that shear hits the system and that dryer, it could really rapidly decay the system. But regardless of the situation, this is still going to be an impactful event for Florida. Especially with the way that this is coming, you rarely ever have systems that come from west out of the far western Gulf and push east like this. So this is very unusual, and so with that, that could possibly make storm surge matters worse. But obviously, if you have a weaker system that makes landfall, storm surge may be weaker compared to if you had a Cat 5 or 4 make landfall. But again, I don't think this is too far fetched. I do think though that the models may be overdoing the weakening process just a bit. But I also think that I could certainly see a Cat 5 or 4 hurricane headed towards Florida, where we can do more like a low end Cat 3 or makes landfall as a mid grade Cat 2. I could certainly see that. So again, definitely some interesting scenarios, but I'm not totally surprised. So I talked about a little bit about the trough interaction, and here's the GFS shows this pretty well. So we get that strengthening process today. Rapid intensification should take place either some point later on tonight or tomorrow. You can see that favorable trough interaction. Trough to the north. This should allow for really good flow aloft. So we should be looking at a fairly rapidly intensifying system. But another thing that our trough is going to do is also going to be a little bit of a saving grace in the fact that it may not allow this system to make landfall as a Cat 4 or Cat 5. And notice how when that trough really comes in and imparts that southwesterly to westerly shear over Milton, that should allow Milton to weaken at least somewhat, if not rapidly, because I thought we had situations before where we had a system kind of like Francine, where we had Francine, it started to rapidly intensify as it got close to that trough interaction, but then as it made landfall, it rapidly decayed. So again, this may be a scenario where we have a system that it may make landfall as a strong hurricane, but it rapidly decays from shear and dry air. So that's certainly a possibility. Again, this system very much reminds me of Francine, but the general environment is much more favorable than Francine. But it does have the similarities in the fact that we'll probably have a rapidly intensifying system that decays right at landfall rapidly from shear and dry air. And speaking of dry air, we can kind of see this off the. I want to look at the HMO model. I think it's a little bit more realistic. So we get down here and I'll drop down here and I'll show you guys this dry air punch that I'll continue to talk about. So look at how compact and tight that core is there on the system. Whenever you have a tight, compact core like what this model is showing, it's a lot less susceptible to dry air intrusions. Now, what you have happen here is as this system approaches Florida, you see that shear over top of the system starts to sneak in that southwesterly shear from our trough, and you allow these dry air intrusions to really get into that core, and it weakens the system fairly rapidly. So again, it's not it's not an unlikely. It's actually a very interesting scenario, but I also think that it's a high chance of that happening. We may have an approaching Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane headed towards Florida that rapidly decays once it makes landfall from shear and dry air. So certainly, I think the HMO model has a really good idea. Again, models may be overdoing the weakening process just a little bit. It may make landfall as a strong hurricane, but I think that thing rapidly decays from dry air and shear. So those are my overall thoughts on the system. I don't really think that. I think overall, regardless of situation, this is going to be a bad situation for Florida. But I think some of the better case scenarios is a rapidly decaying system compared to a rapidly strengthening system on approach to landfall. So it's definitely some interesting scenarios by some of the models, but it is interesting that generally most models agree that there should be some weakening or decaying of the system as it approaches landfall. And again, I don't think that's unlikely. I think that's likely, if anything, with that shear to the north from our trough, and then also that pretty significant dry air punch. So again, very interesting, which could also help a tornado threat, but that's way on down the line. But generally speaking, we can. It's looking like we'll have a pretty strong system headed towards Florida that rapidly decays on approaching landfall. So here I'm at the National Hurricane Center's website, and I'm just looking at the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities. And again, probabilities are really going to start to increase over Florida. So expect impacts to maybe start as early as Wednesday and getting into your Thursday. Here's a flash flooding potential. You have a moderate threat already. Wouldn't be surprised if it goes up a little bit, especially if you have the stronger system at landfall. So definitely not good there. And then you have a look at the cone, which I'm pretty sure that everybody wants to see where this thing is going. And the cone is starting to become more narrow, which means that there's getting a little bit more consensus, but you can see how it could get as far north as Cedar Key, Florida. maybe even a little bit further north than that, and then it may get as far south as maybe as far south as Miami. Granted, I think a more middle ground between just maybe just south of Tampa. I think this trough, as always, these troughs love to trend deeper and stronger. Wouldn't be surprised. It's another one of those cases. So I wouldn't be surprised you see a more southern landfall, maybe more towards just south of Tampa, maybe. So that'll be interesting to watch. But you can see how the National Hurricane Center is forecasting a major hurricane towards Florida, Cat 3 hurricane, 120-mile-an-hour winds. So certainly not a good situation for Florida. Um, but those are my overall thoughts on this system, guys. I'll be back at you a video tomorrow morning.